My name is Doris. Standing on my balcony overlooking the city, a soft breeze cuts through the noise of traffic below. The city lights flicker like stars, but my mind is stuck in that fateful moment at the anniversary dinner. I remember the scrape of my chair, louder than my father's toast. I'd left the napkin neatly folded on the table as I walked out, feeling Chicago's night air slap me cold and cutting. Yet, somehow it was cleansing. I didn't let a tear fall, despite the burning in my eyes. I just stood there, coat unbuttoned, heart steadying against the chill. I grew up in a family in Topeka, Kansas. My parents, Victor and Hester, owned a struggling antique store. My younger sister, Zelda, was always the center of attention. Since she could first speak, she'd been the golden child. Every school achievement, every happy family photo, all the praises were solely hers. My parents were smitten by her charm and bubbly personality. I, on the other hand, quickly learned to fade into the background, like a shadow in the corner of the family portrait. When I was 14, I won a state-level accounting competition. I waited on the stage, excitement bubbling inside me, hoping to see my parents in the crowd. But they never showed up. Later, Mom called to say Zelda had a school play that ran late. I forced a smile and said it was okay, but the memory of that empty seat in the audience felt like a wound that never fully healed. As we grew older, the dynamic in our family didn't change. The antique store was constantly on the verge of closing. I was working as a financial analyst in a well-known firm by then, and I wired $300 a month to keep the store afloat. I'd also spend my weekends helping them sort out their financial messes, fixing their balance sheets, and dealing with tax issues. However, Mom and Dad always thanked Zelda for her decorative ideas to attract customers, completely ignoring the fact that my financial expertise was the only thing preventing the store from going bankrupt. Zelda, full of herself, lapped up their approval with a big smile on her face. During family dinners, it was always Zelda's turn to shine. She'd talk about her job in a design company, all her projects and promotions. Meanwhile, I'd sit quietly, sipping my water, while my parents hung on to every word she said. One time, I mustered up the courage to speak. I'd spent weeks analyzing the store's finances and found a way to save them about $10,000. I said, "You're overspending on rare items. If you cut down on some high-end purchases and focus on mid-range antiques, you could turn the business around in a year." Zelda tilted her head and laughed. "That's so naive, Doris. Stick to your spreadsheets. I've got real business sense." A few relatives chuckled along. Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Honey, don't bore us with numbers." I felt my heart sink. "I'm trying to help save the store," I said calmly. Zelda just smirked. "Relax. We're doing just fine." Dad didn't even look at me. He simply said, "Zelda knows what she's doing." As the anniversary dinner for my parents' 32nd wedding anniversary approached, I could sense the tension building. Every time I called, Mom would gush about Zelda's new design awards. "Your sister is so talented. She's going places," she'd say, as if I wasn't the one keeping the family business alive. The dinner was held at a fancy restaurant in the heart of the city. The place was decorated beautifully, with soft music playing in the background and candles flickering on the tables. All our relatives were there, aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen in ages. I took my seat at the far end of the long table. Zelda walked in wearing a bright purple dress, and heads turned. Mom's face lit up like a firework, and Dad clapped her on the back, calling her the pride of the family. No one even glanced my way as I sat there, quietly sipping my water. Throughout the dinner, the conversations revolved around Zelda, her latest design project, her plans for a new collection. When someone asked about me, Mom just said, "Oh, Doris helps with some numbers for the store sometimes." And then she quickly went back to talking about Zelda. I felt my patience wearing thin, but I kept smiling, as I always did. Then Dad stood up, glass in hand. I could see it coming, but I still wasn't prepared for the impact. "We wish Zelda was our only child," he said, loud enough for everyone in the restaurant to hear. The laughter died in the air. Mom just nodded, as if they'd rehearsed this moment. Zelda's smirk flashed under the chandelier, slow and deliberate, like she'd won a battle. Something inside me went silent. I didn't cry, I didn't beg. I just stood up, the scrape of my chair echoing in the suddenly quiet restaurant, and walked out. When I got home, I sat on my couch looking at my phone. The family group chat was still open. With steady hands, I typed, "I'm done helping with the store. No more money, no more advice. Good luck." And I hit send. Almost immediately, the phone started ringing. Dad, Mom, and then Zelda. Texts came flooding in. "What's wrong with you? Call us back," they said. I set the phone face down and let it buzz until the battery died. The next morning, I made coffee and opened my laptop to work on my client spreadsheets. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of relief. I'd been pouring my energy into saving the store for so long, and without me, it was bound to crumble. By the second day, the voicemails changed tone. Dad was angry. "You're ruining the family," he said. Mom's emails were filled with guilt, tripping and half-hearted apologies. Zelda's texts were short and demanding. "You can't just abandon us like this." But I ignored them all. At work, my colleagues noticed a change in me. I was more focused, less stressed. A week later, I decided to take a trip to visit my grandfather, Arthur, in a small coastal town in Maine. He'd always been the one who saw me for who I was, not just in comparison to Zelda. When I arrived at his old, white, painted house by the ocean, he was sitting on the porch, looking out at the sea. He looked up, saw my face, and said, "You look like you've been through hell, sweetheart. Come inside." In his living room, with the smell of salt in the air and the old ceiling fan humming, I finally let it all out. I told him about the dinner, the toast, the years of me sending money, and the way they'd always dismissed me. When I finished, my throat was raw, but I felt lighter. He just nodded slowly and said, "You did everything right, Doris, and they still chose wrong." Then I showed him screenshots of Zelda's social media posts, where she'd called me jealous and useless. Grandpa's face hardened. "That's not family. That's betrayal," he said. He went to his desk and pulled out a folder. It was his estate plan. "I've been watching the way they treat you for years. I always thought they'd change, but I was wrong," he said. That afternoon, he called his lawyer. The lawyer arrived before sunset. I sat on the couch as they talked. Grandpa's voice was firm. "Cut Victor, Hester, and Zelda out of my will. Leave all my properties to Doris. Donate the rest to the local veterans charity." The lawyer nodded, took notes, and left. Grandpa turned to me. "You've carried this family long enough. It's their turn to stand on their own." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. I'd given so much, and they'd thrown me away. When I flew back to Topeka, I knew the storm was coming. And it did. Within a week, the antique store started to fall apart. The bills piled up, and the suppliers refused to give them more credit. The tax penalties hit them hard, just as I'd warned. Zelda's reputation also took a nosedive. She'd always boasted about her role in the store, but when it collapsed, her so-called business acumen was revealed as a farce. The investors she'd been trying to attract pulled out, and her online image was shattered. Cousins started calling her out on her lies, and someone even leaked proof of my monthly transfers. My parents' situation was no better. The bank foreclosed on their house, and they had to move into a small apartment on the outskirts of town. They stopped attending family gatherings, and people whispered about how they treated me. Some nights, I'd lie in bed and wonder if I'd gone too far. But then I'd remember the look on Zelda's face, my father's words, and my mother's silence. That memory would banish the doubt. One evening, my friend Lily came over with takeout and wine. I told her everything that had happened. When I finished, she raised her glass. "To peace," she said. I hesitated for a second and then clinked my glass with hers. "To justice," I replied. A month later, an envelope arrived from Maine. Inside was a handwritten letter from Grandpa Arthur. "It's done. The papers are signed. The properties are yours. You deserve this, Doris, for standing up for yourself." I read the letter 3 times, folded it neatly, and put it in a drawer. That night, standing on my balcony, I realized I'd finally found my peace. I'd built a life for myself, away from the toxicity of my family. I'd learned that walking away isn't a sign of weakness. It's a powerful act of self-love.